Alysia, religious folks, Christians maybe in particular, have a reputation of being kind of hypocrites. And that notwithstanding Jesus ranting against hypocrisy. You're a Christian.
I am.
But if I were to judge by some of your shows that I've seen, you don't seem like a hypocrite.
I hope that I'm not a hypocrite. I think, like, it's not about setting up, for me, it's at least the way that I've conceptualized my faith, it's not about adhering to a certain set of rules. It's more about figuring out a way of life that lets you engage with the world in an authentic way, but also in like a careful, thoughtful, and empathetic way. And for me, it's not, whatever. I curse, I drink, whatever, but that allows me to like interface with people. And I think one of the problems, especially with Christianity, is that there's this idea that, there's this the idea that you somehow have to be perfect, and you can't let anyone see your flaws, and you can't let anyone see your sin. But then no one really wants to talk to you because no one knows who you are. They don't know what's made you. They don't know what you struggle with. They don't know like your secrets and your shame and your joys. And I think that's a part of the reason why people don't really get down with Christianity, because it seems like a farce. It seems like a front.
So honesty for you about your own faith is kind of essential virtue.
Totally. I think it's what it creates a space in which people want to have dialogue. They might not agree with me all the time, but they're like, oh, you engaged with this. It's not some dead thing that you're trying to sort of like hold above everyone else's head and say, look how much better I am because of the way I practice, which I think a lot of people do. But it's saying like, this is something that has guided my life, has shaped my life, still informs my life, and it makes me me. And if you want to understand who I am, then that's a part of it.
So one way to read kind of honesty is as an act, right?
Right.
But the other way to read it would be to think of it, there's something about this faith that you embrace that lets you be
me,
honest, that lets you be you.
Yeah, I think one of the things in particular is the idea that, you're not, or the way that I've conceptualized Christianity and why I've sort of chosen to practice it is this idea that you're not qualified or disqualified by whatever makes you you. And so you can then embrace that, all of your struggle and all of your successes are part of the package. And God's already like put his stamp on it and said, yeah, that's good. And so, when you're dealing with something that maybe you'd like to change or maybe you wouldn't like to change, you can just be honest and open about it and if you can converse with your deity about it honestly, then you can converse with yourself about it honestly, and then you can converse with others about it as well. So it's like this three-way relationship between your spiritual source, yourself, and then your larger community.
At one point you were choosing between or struggling between making a choice between Christianity and Islam, because both of these religions are somehow in your family tree. Can you say a bit about this choice and struggle?
So my mother's side of the family is very Christian, Baptist. My father's side is pretty non-practicing, but when my father went to college, he embraced Islam. And then left it for various reasons. But when I was a child, he used to read me stories out of the Quran, and I thought Arabic seemed so lovely. It was such a beautiful language. And being that I'm a linguist, it kind of made sense, so that I was like, oh, I have to learn how to speak that language. And so when I went to college, I started taking Arabic, and for me, I had a lot of friends who were Muslim, and I became quite close with a number of them, and I found that the religion sort of gave me a practical, like day-to-day, what you should do to like be a good person, what you should do to like please God. And I thought that was really useful because as a Christian, it's kind of, it's a little bit like laissez-faire, and God's grace is everywhere and it's abundant. So, I mean, for me, it was like I didn't really understand, the nature of like why sin or why not sin. If God's already covered it all, like, and essentially you can never do anything to, to lose God's grace or merit God's grace, then essentially it's just free, and you could just eat as much of it. You could just binge eat, on God's grace and whatever.
So why aren't you binge eating?
Well, I think so. Actually, this is really awesome like talk that I listened to, and it really sort of transformed the way that I think of the notion of grace and sin as a sort of this paradigm. And it's not really about if you sin, then you're damned, and if you don't sin, then you're saved, or you're somehow allowed into heaven, or this, that, and the third. I think it's like the idea that you could sin and that's fine, but if you do, it sort of makes you a little bit less effective. And maybe if you believe that your purpose as a spiritual person or as a Christian is to sort of like bring the character and the vision that Jesus had for the world into the world, if you're supposed to embody that and sort of champion that, then sinning makes you a little bit less effective in doing that for various reasons. Maybe they have practical implications other than, don't do this, don't do that. I think, and for me, it was like, oh, that makes sense, because it's not about like, death or life or damned or saved, but it's more like to do your job well as a Christian, like sin kind of keeps you from doing that. So maybe you want to do your job well, so don't sin. But if you do, it's totally cool, because I've got grace and my storehouse is like huge, so I can just like keep expending it on you. But like essentially it's like, if you believe in the kingdom of God, do you want to be an expense to the kingdom of God, or do you want to be an asset? And you can be an expense all you want, because like, I mean, it's limitless, but you could start being an asset, start actually like bringing about, more of God's character, more of God's grace, more of his empathy, more of his compassion, more of his power, more of his change in the world. And if you want to do that, then maybe sinning is not so effective in bringing that about.
Let me take you back to the choice between Islam and Christianity. I diverted you on this journey toward that answer.
Yeah. So Islam. Yeah. I mean, Islam makes so much sense. I mean, it makes a lot of sense to me. Practices of fasting, conceptions of the community, and like communal responsibility. Like your faith is not just for you, but it's also for like the edification and sort of the benefit of the whole community, was something that I really resonated with, and felt like gave me it made my faith actually a thing that I could practice and walk out, as opposed to just some ideology that was in my mind, which was more or less true. I mean, I believed in Christianity, but it was a belief. It wasn't a practice.
And those practices would be different than rules, which you said that at the beginning you kind of
I mean, in the certain sense of like, I think a lot of the hypocrisy about Christianity is sort of knitted up in this idea of grace versus sin. And if you don't believe that, there's any benefit to keeping God's sort of commands, then you just do whatever you want, and it's totally fine, because there's no consequence to it. When I was exploring Islam, I really was hit by the notion that like God was a king, and his rule should be followed, because it is a matter of respect and honor and fealty, to practice as God has asked you to, because he's a king. He's not just your buddy that you like hang out with, and cry to, but he's also, your superior, your commander, and as a result, you should pay homage. And for me, that was really, it kind of gave more weight. It made me want to practice something as opposed to just think about it.
But ultimately, if I recall correctly, it's a kind of self-sacrificial love
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
was determinative in your own spiritual journey.
It was. I was, really struggling between whether I should practice Christianity or Islam or practice a different faith entirely. And the consequences of the choice were dire, not only in terms of a spiritual sense, like identity sense, but in a real way for me. It meant either I could marry this particular person or I couldn't. I marry a person that I loved quite a bit. And so I was like, all right, I need to make a choice. It's no longer it's no longer esoteric. It has real world consequences. And I would sit for hours, Bible on one side, Quran on the other side, reading and just being so dumbfounded and just really at a stalemate. And I asked in probably still is the most humble I've ever been in my life. I was just like, God, I don't care. Whatever. My soul is in turmoil. So either tell me to practice Christianity or practice Islam or practice nothing or practice Buddhism or whatever, but I'll be obedient to whatever choice you tell me. And I was like, but I need you to tell me right now. It has to be right now. I can't wait. I really can't wait. And my mom, immediately sent me a text message. I was living in Egypt at the time, and my mother doesn't text, so it was sort of strange. She sent me a text message at the time, and she said, the only kind of love that matters is sacrificial love. And it was the watershed moment for pretty much everything afterwards, because I really felt in Christianity, you have the pinnacle, you have the story of a God that says, I'd rather die than be separate from you. I'd rather walk amongst you. I'd rather talk with you. I'd rather eat with you. I'd rather, comfort you. I'd rather be made smaller, in a sense, to be amongst you. I'd rather die on a cross in a shameful death. Than for this gap between you and I to exist. And for me, that was the kind of love that I was experiencing in my romantic life, and that was the kind of love that I knew was capable of changing me as a person, and that was the kind of love that I believed could change others, and I wanted to follow that.
And so basically it was, a certain attraction to the person of Jesus?
Yes.
As embodiment of who God is?
Yes, totally. And then I went through this whole rejection after I made that decision. I completely rejected the idea of Jesus. He was the most difficult person in the Trinity for me to really get a hold of. And at some point I said something I don't even believe in the Trinity anymore.
Well, let's leave aside for a moment a Trinity. But how about this? I mean, you have stage presence and you're a performing artist. Mm-hmm. How does a performing artist kind of get attracted to Jesus? We have no idea how he looked. We have no idea how he dressed. Apparently, nobody around figured out it was really important to know how he looked, how he dressed. Mm-hmm. We have no idea whether he ever danced, for instance. We know that he had went to some kind of parties, but we know pretty certainly he never had sex. We know that he didn't have a place to live. How does a performing artist get interested in Jesus?
Well, Jesus was and wasn't a rock star. He kind of was a rock star. And I think
what kind of a rock star?
Well, okay, so there's always this paradigm that people ask you if you're a performer, would you rather be rich or would you rather be famous, right? And for me, it's always been, I'd rather be famous. I don't care if I'm broke as a joke, but I want to be famous. And I think for me, Jesus was kind of he was people talked about him. People knew about him. He was kind of like this, like, what is going on? You know, like, who is this guy walking on the scene with like authority? Like, he knows exactly who he is. And that, I think, is something that, like, as a performer, I never really thought about it until this moment, but as a performer, definitely totally resonates. It's like, you walk into a place and you know who you are and you're unapologetic about it, right? And I think that, because so many people, unfortunately, don't feel like they have the permission to actually really like own and embody their identity. And I think people are looking around asking for permission. Can I be myself? Can I say this? Can I do this? What are other people gonna think about me? And Jesus is like, I don't really care what you think of me. I mean, I do, but I really don't. Like, I'm gonna call you a nest of vipers. I'm gonna, throw a whip around in the temple. I'm gonna like walk up to people who don't even know me. I'm gonna talk to a Samaritan woman, totally like he was like bucking a lot of cultural and social and political norms at the time. And I'm like, if as a performance artist, if I can't do that, then then what are you really talking about? What are you really saying? If you're not
it's kind of authenticity and courage.
Yeah, I mean, really, courage is huge. I mean,
right.
Yeah, I think to live any life authentically, you have to have some courage, because you're going to face a lot of opposition at some point. And then are you going to like buckle? Are you going to be like, no, I believe what I believe? And I might take the ramifications. I might take the consequences of believing this, which is totally true in my case. I mean, I am like an openly Christian woman who talks a lot about sexuality, and I get called the most horrible names. And I'm like, you can't actually...
By fellow Christians?
Yeah, by fellow Christians, by other people who are like, if you were a Christian, you wouldn't be saying this, that, and the third. And I'm like, well, one, I've already done the internal work. Like, I've already probably called myself all the names that you could possibly call me. And then I've also like dealt with that, like walked with that, and then also been transparent before you. So you can't like hit me with some secret shame bomb, because I've already talked to you about it. So I think like, and really experience and seeing other people, especially other women, really find like strength and liberation in that expression, being like, oh, as a Christian, I can talk about my sexuality, or as a woman, I can be honest and open with people and like not apologize for it. I feel like it empowers people.
So you talk about sexuality, you talk about virginity,
Yeah.
You talk about temptation.
Yeah.
How do you connect it with your faith?
Yeah, well, I think it's huge, right? It's like the one thing that like first of all, no churches never talk about it. People like, it's like sort of the unspoken rule of like how you advance in ministry. Like the only way to really advance in ministry, as I've seen for a lot of women, is to be married, to be like a fully realized, actualized person. You have to be married, or you have to be like, ridiculously, completely, absolutely, fundamentally celibate, sold out love for Jesus. That's your boyfriend. And like, I'm like, get real. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm just like if God creates the whole being, and the whole being is good, and he looks at it, then I can't be waiting until I'm married to like be somehow whole or who I am. I'm whole now. I'm a single woman. Like, I'm a Black woman. I'm female. I have a mind. I have a body, and I have sexuality. And we're gonna talk about it. At least not like it's some dirty word, or like something that like, or like problems with sexuality. I got so mad at some of the leaders at my church, because they always talk about like, struggling, issues with pornography, or this, that, and the third. And they always talk about it as if men are the only people that could struggle with it. And I'm like, that's just fundamentally not true. Women have sex drives. Like, we have sexual histories. We have sexual appetites. Stop like relegating us to this like unseen corner. It bothers me. So for me, a part of it has been just having a kind of transparency and openness about talking about sexuality from a person who like believes in Christianity, is waiting till she gets married to have sex, but is also somebody who like has had sexual experiences like as a person, and think that's fine.
when you look at kind of Jesus, you talked about self-sacrificial love. You talked about authority that he possessed. How would you describe for yourself what it would mean to lead a life that's kind of inspired by him? In many ways, you've been talking about that, right? But what does it mean to lead a life that somehow is related to him? We talked about sexuality. You talked about authority, other things.
I think like probably the most key and also the most difficult to walk out is really leading a life that is other-centric, in a way that's saying like, that really affirms who you are as an individual by saying like, I need to be me for everyone's sake, and I need you to be you for my sake. It's really difficult. I'm not the most humble person by nature. I'm not the most meek or selfless person either. And I look at the kind of life that Jesus lived, and sometimes I like the passage that always gets me is when he talks about, he looks out over the crowd and he says, I think he's about to feed them. I think one of the times he feeds like the 5,000 or whatever. He looks out over the crowd and he has compassion on them because they were, looked like a flock without a shepherd. And like having that kind of deep empathy, like that deep, like that you want to like move heaven and earth to like help people that you don't even know, is something that I rarely feel, but wish I felt all the time. Like I wish I was absolutely like undone by compassion. And for me, it's like the idea of like struggling against like the kind of like the satisfaction, like my own satisfaction and my own and essentially, I mean, a lot of times they are base in a real sense. Like I just want that, so I'm gonna do it, or I'm just gonna take it. Really struggling against these because not out of an obligation, but out of like a genuine, honest like desire to see like the world edified, like to see like to actually preach the gospel, like the good news, to have good news for people. And that might not be, that may or may not be, cleansing the lepers and like, feeding the homeless and like healing the sick. But it might, whatever piece of the gospel that I have, that God has like entrusted me with. And maybe it is, maybe it's specifically for women, or maybe it's specifically, I don't know, but like bringing that good news to other people and living a life out of the desire and the direction and the purpose to see that, to see that grasped and understood by others, I think.
So you were a guest in the class that ran, kind of Linz and I taught, called A Life Worth Living. And we distinguish there between life being led well, which is a kind of active side, what we do, and life going well for somebody, which is what kinds of things we ought to or can expect to happen to us. What's in your, as you see things, in your view, what's the good news of kinds of circumstances that people need to be in? What moves the compassion for you to say, oh, this is the life that people ought to be living and they aren't? I need to help.
I don't know. That's
Okay, how about this? I was listening to your poem, That Girl.
Yeah. That girl?
Yes.
Yeah.
What does that girl not want, and what does she want?
Yeah. She doesn't want to be used. She wants to be known and loved. And
Respected, I heard also.
Yeah, respect. But I think respect is sort of like, respect is the minimum. And so, you know, and I think one of the maybe faults of that poem, if I would rewrite it now, is that me, but the character in the poem has been denied the kind of minimum level of respect, and so that's all she asks for in the poem.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not all she wants. And I think like a lot of times people get confused. They get denied something and they're just like, well, I just want, you know, that thing that I've been denied, right? And then I'll be happy, or I'll be cool with it, or I'll be, I'll settle for that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not about settling. Like, you know, it's like, I came to give you life and life more abundantly. Like, I want to have abundant life. So I don't just want to be respected, which is like the general, you know, basic human, like, respect my space, respect my body, respect my choice. Like, basic respect. But like, I want to be known. So I want to be understood. I want to have someone sit and talk and converse and go through the process of like understanding, picking apart like what makes me me, and then I want that person to be loved after having been understood to the degree that we can understand anyone, like understood.
So would that be part of good news?
Yeah,
in a sense, something that you might want for yourself,
Totally.
obviously, but also for others?
Totally. I think that's, if not the basic human desire, is to be known and loved. And I think a lot of tension comes into that. So it's like, oh, if I really show this person who I am, they won't love me. So I can't be known. I can be loved, but I can't be known. I can't really show who I am. And then there's the idea of, you know, being sort of using who you are as kind of like a way to like buffer between yourself, like being so maybe overbearing or overblown with your personality and sort of being so aggressive that you never really actually let anyone love you because, you know, you're just like, you'll never understand. You have to understand me first to love me. And I think it's really a nice sort of, you know, loop.
Yeah. In some ways, with personal relationships, it's you have to kind of go halfway and risking, and then the circle starts moving. If you don't, if you wait until everything is kind of clear, you're never going to experience it in many ways.
Which is totally the whole problem with faith.
Yeah, it's like, exactly what faith is, isn't it? Right.
Yeah.
Right. So when you were talking about compassion, I saw your eyes welling with tears. And I take it that's a tear maybe of desire, but maybe for something that's beautiful.
Yeah, it is.
But maybe also it's a tear of, in my eyes, if there were, they would also be tears of, I haven't quite lived up to that which I desire. So how does one, but this is a really tall order. What do you, as a Christian, how do you live with failure, right?
Yeah.
Not some terribly egregious failure, although that's also, but a kind of everyday but deeply human kind of failure.
Yeah. I think the only way you can really live with it is, for me, is knowing, it's back to the whole idea of grace. Grace is so essential. But the only way of really, like, living with it is knowing that, like, it's, like, there's grace for it. Like, it's not going to, like, define who you are. Like, Christianity is all about the process of becoming. Like, you will never be perfect. Like, you'll never be perfect. Like, you'll never be Jesus himself. Like, all you can do is, like, look more and more like him. And so, sure, you have your failures, but then you know what's possible for you and what is not possible in your own being, in your own, like, with your own strength and your own sort of how you were made, right? And And that's okay too, because then later you have the wonderful revelation of being like, oh my God, I just, helped someone and didn't think about myself.
What a great thing, huh?
Yeah, like I'm like, wow, and I mean, it's really, really, it's like minute victories that really sort of like, you're like, yes, I'm on the right path. And I had one. My landlord locked herself out of her house and her car. So she had no way of getting either way, and no one was home. So she called me and she asked me if I was at home so I could let her in, and I wasn't at home. I was 25 minutes away in my department. I could have walked home, and I was like, I'm not at home, and she was like, oh, okay, never mind. And so I hung up, and then I was like, no, call her back. You could walk home. It would take you whatever, it would take you an hour trip, but you could walk home. So I called her. I was like, oh, do you want me to walk home? And she was like, I was like, I can do that. I don't have anything to do for the next hour, so I could totally walk home and let you in and then come back. And she was like, no, I don't need you to. And I was like, well, if you need me to, it's okay. And she's like, no. She's like, I think my husband's on his way home anyway, so he'll let me in. And I was like, oh, okay, well, just let me know. And she's like, okay. So she hung up. Normal me would have never even called back to be like, can I walk home? And I would have never offered that. I have stuff to do. I'm about to defend my dissertation perspectives. I don't have time to be concerned with you, and I'm super lazy on the inside and don't want to walk 25 minutes home to walk 25 minutes back. I don't want to do that. But none of those things really crossed my mind in that moment, and I asked her, and I was like, and then afterwards, I was like, oh, this is a part of what, I think, Jesus, what I would refer to as consecration, is when you just do something, not obedience, because God didn't ask me, to it wasn't like God told me, and Alysia, you need to go home and do
otherwise.
That. Right. But it wasn't obedience. It was just I want to I will sacrifice something for someone else. And as a result, end up consecrating a part of my life. Consecrating the time that I spend helping someone else. And I had never really understood that or even thought about it or even done it. And that was one of the times I was like, oh, maybe something is changing here, because that's not a normal impulse for me at all in any capacity.
So you talked about compassion and a certain form of sometimes sacrifice that it takes in order to actually act upon compassion that we have. But I've heard you talk also about kind of perceiving the wonder of life. Kind of 1,000 miracles happening. I'm not sure exactly what your phrase is, but I recall you saying something to that effect, which is kind of this very different side of maybe Christian faith or just the experiences of being human.
Yeah, for me, I see creation, and for me, my soul says it's good. That's just what happens. And so for me, it's just oh, you're just affirming what God's already said. God already called creation good. For me to recognize that creation is good should be totally the normal and natural thing.
Yeah, but I can do that in a dour face, right? It's good.
No. But do you believe that it's good? You experience it as good.
Tell me about it, yeah.
And for me, it's I love this world, and maybe that's why I'm not so attached to the idea of heaven, because I don't really I'm cool with death, but I don't actually want to be remade and then taken away from this world. This is where I am from. This is where I was created. I'm out of this substance. If I hate it, then I hate part of myself. And I think that's, for me, it's so silly. I probably shouldn't say silly, but that's what I mean. Is that for a lot of Christians, there's this, trope, or there's this idea, in the world, but not of the world. And it's biblical, or it's you have to hate the world, you reject it. I'm like, I don't reject it. I love it. That's why I want it to be like made into the fullness that God has it to be. Like, I don't hate it. Like, if I hated it, then like I should just leave. I should just extricate myself from the situation. But like I wake up every morning, and I wake up early every morning because like dawn is beautiful every morning. Like, it is just categorically beautiful every morning. Like, you see like spring, and like it seems, you know, cliche, but you're like, these tulips are huge. I was in like Washington Square Park, and the tulips were like a gourd. They were like, had opened up to fullness, and they weren't even like tulips anymore. Like, they were just huge and massive. And I was like, these are beautiful. Like, who created these? Who in their excess of like creative genius was like, yeah, I'm gonna make these flowers today. Like, for me, it's just like, and I think as an artist, like, it really resonates with me, the idea of creating something beautiful and creating a space for that to be appreciated is like something I do every day, something I do when I walk on stage. It's something I do when I make time to write or read or listen or just experience the world around me. And I think like it's a part of worship for me. It's a part of like worshiping God, like calling creation what it is, which is good and beautiful, is an act of testifying like who God is.
You wrote a poem called Joy, and you called it the most important poem I've ever written and likely will ever write. I don't know when you wrote the poem. I don't know whether it still holds true. What is joy?
Joy is like joy is the idea that like I guess I would have to say that I'd have to start like seriously from the place where I wrote it, which was a place where I really started experiencing joy, which was a place of absolute abject grief. I mean, I was just a mess, basically, and I had been a mess for a really long time. And I think part of it was actually like I was angry at God. I was really angry. And
why were you angry?
I was angry because I didn't end up marrying the person that I wanted to marry because he was a Muslim and I was a Christian, and I felt like God told me, no, that's not for you, which it totally was not for me. Now I know that, but like at the time I was like, I was obedient, but you like took something from me and you didn't replace it. So like, how can you be good? And so I was like grieving that loss for like years. And I wrote this poem, I wrote joy because I didn't actually feel like I ever wanted to experience joy, because that would be somehow like denying what I had been through and like what the person that I loved, like that, like being like, oh, you could be happy without them. It was saying like, you must not really have loved them if you can actually be happy without them. And so I wrote like it out of like just a lack. But it's really funny because the first passage of the Bible that I ever memorized was the joy of the Lord is my strength. And so like joy is strength, like not like strength is strength, not courage is strength, not like honor or whatever, but joy is strength. And it's totally that. It allows you to it allows you to walk through experiences where you don't think you have it in you to actually survive or make it through, and be like, actually, I can walk through this because I have joy, and joy is totally not happiness. I'm not quite sure.
What's the difference?
I think happiness is circumstantial. I think like happiness is more like ephemeral, and joy is something that like, I don't know. I don't even have the words for it, but it's like deep here. It's like a well, you know, so even if there's not water at the surface, you can pump and like generate the water to come out. And I feel like that's joy. And happiness is, oh, I just want a little sip, so I'm going to dip my little dipper in and sip. No, joy is like, it's it can be a labor to find joy in something. But once you can find joy in like the worst thing that you've ever experienced, then you can find joy everywhere. And for me, it was only after that experience of like just like being slain that like I like just began finding the most minute things absolutely perfect. And so that poem really comes out of like being really just in awe of small things like sidewalks and like crickets and like women singing and like, just small things, or like passages of literature that you really love. Like all of those for me are like things that strengthen me on a regular basis.
So for you, Christian faith isn't rules. Is it joy?
Yeah, I guess it would be.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you.